Hello, welcome to Education Hub. This is a video on the epistemology and doctrine of liberation of Sankhya philosophy. This is a continuation of a previous video on Sankhya philosophy. If you have missed it, please click on the card at the top of your screen to watch the first part of Sankhya philosophy. When we talk about epistemology of Sankhya philosophy, we actually talk about how Sankhya philosophy sees and treats knowledge. In our previous video, we had talked about how Sankhya philosophy believes in two elements, that is Purush and Prakriti. And because of its belief in the two elements of Purush and Prakriti, Sankhya philosophy is said to be a dualistic metaphysical school of thought. And as Purush and Prakriti come into contact with each other, it produces the world of object around us. Valid knowledge is the definite cognition of knowledge plus modification of our buddhi. Which means that if we come to know of something new or a new knowledge is given to us, but it causes no change in our thinking, then the knowledge is not valid. Valid knowledge must always cause a positive change in the thinking of the person receiving that knowledge. And this is the definition by which Sankhya philosophy recognizes a valid source of knowledge. And this definite cognition of knowledge is referred to as Artha Parichitti. Please make a note of this because this is very important from the examination point of view. Sankhya philosophy accepts only three independent sources of knowledge out of all the six sources of knowledge that we have in our Indian schools of logic. And the three independent sources of knowledge which are accepted by Sankhya philosophy are perception, inference, and Shabd. We will take a detailed look at perception and Shabd as the elements of knowledge accepted by Sankhya philosophy. Perception means using sense organs to gather information about objects around us. As per Sankhya philosophy, perception is of two types, Nirvikalp and Savikalp. Nirvikalp is the indeterminate form of perception and it occurs at the very first moment of contact between the object and our senses. And the information we get from this moment of contact is known as alochana. Savikalp, on the other hand, happens after Nirvikalp and is the determinate form of perception. Savikalp arises from analysis, synthesis, and interpretation of the information by our mind or manas, and this process is referred to as vivechana. Therefore, at first, when we just see, touch, hear, smell, or taste an object, the primary information we get is nirvikalp. And after that, when we think about it, and our brain tells us about the exact nature of the object that we just saw, touched, heard of, smelt, or tasted, is referred to as savikalp. Thus, nirvikalp is the first reaction of our senses, and savikalp is the response our mind generates based on these reactions. Please try to remember that savikalp cannot occur without nirvikalp. And according to Sankhya philosophy, the right, valid knowledge of the reality is referred to as Tattva Gyan. Please make a note of all these underlined Sanskrit terms because multiple choice based questions or short questions can be asked from these Sanskrit terms. Now let us look at the third valid source of knowledge as accepted by Sankhya philosophy. So Shabd as a source of knowledge means verbal testimony. And this verbal testimony must always come from a trustworthy person to be accepted as Shabd. The words or statements of a person who is a liar or a cheater cannot be called a valid source of knowledge. Shabd can be of two types, Lokik and Vedic. Lokik Shabd is the verbal testimony or statements of trustworthy people. And Vedic Shabd are the statements or words that are written or chanted in the Vedas. You might already know that in the Vedic and pre-Vedic ages, Vedas were not written down and their knowledge was passed through recitation. And that is the primary reason why Shabd refers to only verbal testimony or statements and not written words. Moving on, we see here that Shabd is made of four elements. First, we have Apt Vachan, which means authoritative statements or testimony issued by someone respectful and powerful. Then comes Vakya, which simply means words. Then we have Vachya, the objects denoted by the words. And finally, we have Arth, which means the meaning of the words or the statements. Now we will closely look at the doctrine of liberation as given to us by Sankhya philosophy. As we have discussed in our previous video, Sankhya is a very theoretical school of philosophy and gives no rules or regulations to be followed in order to attain liberation. It only gives us the knowledge of what liberation is, and the steps to attain liberation comes under the yoga philosophy, which is the practical part of Sankhya philosophy. So, Sankhya philosophy talks about three types of pain. First, it tells us about adhyatmic pain, which is caused because of intra-organic reasons like bodily disorders or mental affections. Therefore, when the pain is within the range of our own self and body, it is adhyatmic. Second comes the adhibhautic pain. It is caused by extra-organic natural causes like other people, animals, or plants. And the third kind of pain, according to Sankhya philosophy, is adhidevik. It is caused by supernatural reasons like ghosts and demons. Before we move further, please take a moment to like this video and kindly subscribe to our channel if you find this video helpful. Your support will help us grow and motivate us to keep providing more educational videos. Liberation is referred to as mukti in Sankhya philosophy. The word mukti can be directly translated into simple English as freedom. So, according to Sankhya philosophy, liberation is the complete and absolute cessation of the pain without any possibility of return, which means a person attains mukti or liberation when all the three pains we discussed earlier stops affecting the person. And this state of being, where no pain bothers an individual, is called apavarg. The term associated to this process is dukkhatra vighata. When we translate this, it means that we only way to become free of pain is by attaining liberation. In our next video on yoga philosophy, we will talk about the way of attaining mukti or liberation. Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know your opinion in the comments section, or you can directly email us at the email ID given in the description box.